We're here now.
All right. So, in the previous meeting, you had introduced yourself. So, in this meeting, I would like you to go ahead and share any stories that you have.
That's it. That's our only prompt, Alex.
Well, you've already told me how you got to where you are now, and that went on for a while.
We explored a lot of stuff in the last call,
Yeah, we explored more than a few
from
things. So,
being engineering students to the fears of your generation. Um, Told you a lot about my philosophy on things and people and the world. So we kind of left the call, and you're like, I'm trying to harvest stories. And I think as the guest, it's really challenging to be like, well, what are you looking for? What stories? Because I have lots of stories, but I think it sort of helps to think about what stories are important to you and your audience, and which ones I can pick to fit.
all right. So, what is perhaps the story of the biggest lesson that you learned?
Oh, oh man, biggest. Just writing it down to keep track. So the question is, what? Tell me a story about one of the biggest lessons you've ever learned. This is really a hard question for me because I've never liked ists. I've never liked, favorite. Like I remember thinking in third grade when people would, there would be a worksheet or something. It's like, what's your favorite food? It's like, I don't know, changes. Depends on the day. So I struggle with favorites and bests. And I think when it comes to learning lessons, I think the my current perspective is we're always learning lessons. And sometimes those lessons are painful, and sometimes they're exhilarating, and sometimes they're affirming, but they're all over the place. And they can be tiny or they can be huge and still have a lot of impact. Um, so if I think back to my entrepreneurial days, maybe I'll start there because you're a college senior, you're about to graduate, you're about to go out in the world. And when I left undergrad, I I had just joined a business. I was going to say I started a business, but I really joined a business. Um, and there's probably a lesson in there too about are you the person that jumps off the cliff, or are you the person that rushes after your friend? In my case, I rushed after my friend who jumped off the entrepreneurial cliff, and he's kind of a risk taker and just would try things, and I was kind of a structured worrier, and so I would be there to try to clean up and make sure that he was taking appropriate risks. And that sounds really, really lame to say that, but it's true. Like that's kind of how my experience in the world was. I took very calculated risks, and I would get excited about other people's dreams. I didn't really know what my dream was, but if you had a cool one, I'd be right there, ready to jump in. So I was finishing up my entrepreneurial certificate at the University of Iowa, and there's no better experience to learn about business than to try to run a business. So I met a friend of mine who had formed a computer, like a retail gaming computer company. I actually applied for a job. He was a stranger, but I applied for a job, a part-time job, to assemble computers. And I thought that was just going to be the most fun job for a college student because you would just get, since there were gaming rigs, you would have like the nicest hardware, and you'd really get to know all all the stuff, like all the interfaces and the best the best way to set up different memory and processor combinations, and which video cards worked and which chipsets the best, and which cases were cool. So there's an aesthetic component. It was just going to be awesome to make $10 an hour, plugging cool things in together and seeing how they worked. So, so I applied for this job. I showed up on my first day, and um, I realized that they didn't actually have any customers. and they only had $400. So if I worked one 40-hour week at $10 an hour, the company would be bankrupt. So that was I just felt like I landed my dream college job. And it was a struggle to realize that this company didn't really even exist. But I was in all these entrepreneurship courses and I looked at this opportunity and I said, well, why don't I help you build the business? Like, let's actually make this a real life assignment, real life homework. And we did. And so I joined the company, and the other members of that organization that were less active, but just really wanted the profit, um, they kind of didn't participate much anymore. And it just came down to me and my buddy Mike. And we took a look at this business, and they'd only built two computers, one for their uncle and one for their dad. So one didn't have a lot of people in the funnel. Um, and we were looking at this going, where's the margin? We can't buy hardware at retail prices and charge essentially a service fee on top of that and really have it still be affordable. So we immediately ran into this challenge of economics where it's like if I could go to Best Buy and get a computer off the shelf with similar specs for $300 less, I would do that. So we were struggling with this, and then we realized that Mike, my business partner, and we both had a similar job at the university. He worked in the Memorial Union and was desktop support for a lot of the important people in the student affairs org at the university. And I worked in the residence halls and I did desktop support for all of the staff in all of the housing and dining. And we looked at this and we realized that people, like all these employees of the university, kept asking us to fix their home computers. I'm like, hey, could you help me with getting my email set up? This was very late 90s, early 2000s. So a large percent of the population still struggled with concepts that we think are pretty benign today. And we were looking at all this demand to do what we thought was silly work. And we realized there was a pattern. Um, and so here is one lesson in this already, which is um, know your tendency to jump off the cliff or follow your friend. Mine was follow the friend. The next was um, be ready to be wrong. We really didn't have a good business, but we were formed and we had credit cards and we could operate, but we didn't really know anything about how to find people that wanted what we had. Whereas the work that we were shrugging off was really important, and it ended up becoming our core business because all these people that knew us and knew our expertise were begging for us to do work, and all of a sudden when we just started saying yes, we started getting a lot of work. And that was a really really important first step in our growth, was to say, well, what am I actually hearing? The customer is right, and right now we have customers lined up. Now the question was, will we find other customers like them? We don't know. But right now we have people willing to give us money to do something that's easy, that we enjoy, that helps them. So we should probably try that. So one of the other lessons, I can't even remember my top five, but what made me think to tell this story was when I was running this business, 13 employees, two cities, two vehicles, um, computers lined up. Like we had more work than we could do for a point, which was incredible. Um, but one of the lessons in running this business was people are always telling you stuff. And what I mean by this is um, when you run a business, everyone has an opinion or an idea or a question. Everyone has something. Oh, you should talk to this person. Oh, have you thought about this? You should really go to these networking events. What channels are you using to advertise? Everyone's got an opinion. And at the end of the day, it's your job as the entrepreneur or the leader or the facilitator, whatever role you choose to be in when you're getting all this input. It's your job to sift through it and decide what is useful. And what I love about business is that there aren't always obvious answers. And I think that's really important because it changes it from a spreadsheet activity into a creative activity. Because maybe those questions or those recommendations from people in the community were really important and it just didn't make sense to us yet. Or they were just not very useful. Um, so people are always telling you stuff, and it's your job to sift through it and figure out what's meaningful and true to you, which is very empowering, by the way. And another lesson in the top five was learning how to say yes to the right customer and learning how to say no to the wrong customer. And I think this applies outside of business as well in our life, whether it's people we hang out with, whether it's activities that we sign up for, majors you choose, which we talked about last time. Um, there's a big, we had a big breakthrough in running this business when we said, that just isn't the sort of work that we should spend our time on. When we have work lined up, we shouldn't spend 3 hours at the customer's house to do a $30 upgrade. That's just not worth it for us to even drive there and take that one on. But we'd happy to do the upgrade if you buy this other service with it. Now you fit our profile better. Or we had one customer that just we offered a 60-day guarantee on our work, and anything that went wrong, it didn't even have to be our fault. If anything went wrong after we fixed your computer, we'd give you 60 days to call us back and we'll fix that too. It was just a nice thing to do. And it supported our brand as being really professional. And we had one client that would just call us back and call us back and call us back and call us back. And their equipment was really not great. And they just simply couldn't afford to upgrade it. And so we had to essentially say, here's a refund on our contract. Like this work doesn't fit what we do. So I'm really sorry you're having these challenges. That we fix computers and make them great and make you enjoy it, but we just can't support your need. And that seems crazy if someone would say that to you. That it seems really harsh, but it's also really important to know who you are, what you value, where you do your greatest work, how you contribute to the world in a really productive way. And so I think that was another lesson that I learned as a 22-year-old kid is know when to say no to the wrong opportunity and say yes to the right opportunity. I remembered another one. So I've hit three of the five, and this was, 20 years ago. So I'm really surprised I'm remembering these things. But number three that I can recall was you don't get what you don't ask for. This comes up all the time. You've heard it before. It's so true. And it's related to saying yes to the right things. If you know what seems right and important, no one's going to hand it to you. You have to go say that that's what you want, and then you have a chance. If you're just waiting for someone to give you the thing that you want, it might not ever happen. So be courageous to say what you need, say what you want, say what works. In the psychology space, this is also called boundary setting, is saying what's in bounds, what's out of bounds. But you don't get what you don't ask for is another way to say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. This is what will work for me. How can we make that happen? So useful, so important. Let me pause there as I've just walked you through my undergraduate exit into my young entrepreneurial life and see where maybe I should dig in further, what's standing out, and get your thoughts, Alex.
Well, so how long was that over? That little business of yours? Or girlfriend
That was
business?
over 3 years.
So over the course of 3 years, you took something with two customers and $400 in their pockets and turned it into
Yep.
something of reasonable success.
Yeah, and the reasonable success came a lot faster because we learned pretty quick that what we had wasn't working, but we had this other demand. So while we were still students and still working on campus, that's when we really started building out that university employee customer base. Um, and it really started picking up after about that first year. So my last year of undergrad, we were doing mostly being students with part-time jobs, trying to start a business. And then when we left undergrad, things really started picking up. So it only took a year to kind of transition into that we're really doing it space.
All right. How long did this business of yours last?
It is still in existence, which is
Oh,
incredible. My business partner transitioned it into more of a franchise style model.
all right.
So he's still, one of the things we found is that there are a lot of people that like to do technical work that have zero interest in running a business. And so my partner Mike, when I exited, he kept the company and he kept the brand alive, and he still has a store where he has a technical guy who responds to phone calls and does technical work, and then Mike just takes a little bit of the revenue and does his bookkeeping for him, just keeps the admin side, the mechanics of the business running. So it still exists. It's funny to see our logo. Our logo is still out there. The logo that I helped design 20 years ago. So it's still around. It's just different than what we started.
So, what did you do when you eventually exited that business?
Yeah, um, that was a hard time. That was a hard time when I exited that business because we had just done the largest amount of work in a month ever. I think I think we did, I think we were like a $2 million business. Like, I don't know if that's possible, but I think in the last month we did like $20,000 worth of work. And with student workers, like it was a lot of computer repairs in one month.
It's impressive.
But we weren't profitable because we Mike and I were pretty exceptional at what we did, and we built our business model around the idea that we could reproduce us, and that's a lesson in entrepreneurship as well. Uh, that you can't clone yourself, and it's also probably not the right goal to actually clone yourself. We need to celebrate each person's individuality, but our model just didn't scale because we were way more efficient and effective at the job than the people we could hire. And that doesn't mean they weren't great. I loved every one of our technicians that we hired. We had a great time fixing machines, but the numbers just didn't work out. If it took you 3 times as long to get the same goal, the margin just disappeared. So it was hard for me to leave, but I was ready to earn income that I could live on. Every dollar was being reinvested in the business, which is useful when you're young and don't have responsibilities and don't need health insurance, and you can get by on $700 a month rent. You can take a lot of risks, which is probably another lesson in the story is know when it's safe to take risks. Um, but we were just living slim and finding a way to make it work and essentially living a dream. And it just came to a point where I'm in my mid 20s, haven't had a real job yet, have loans that are accruing interest, and we just needed something different. So I chose to exit the organization. I took a laptop that we had fixed from some spare parts, and that was it for my compensation for 3 years. Was one broken laptop, and off I went. And apparently, the house wasn't totally in order when I left. And I didn't know this until years later when I talked to my partner Mike. But um, he had to do a decent amount of annoying stuff to get the business in the right place. But I thought I had done well by him and everyone. It was just really hard to say um, I don't have another round in me, and the conversation that ended the partnership looked something like, um, look, what we're doing isn't unique, and we want to scale it. Like we want to have locations all over the place, and we want to find a model that we can grow. And I found this franchise from Phoenix that wanted to come into our geographic area. And I said, Mike, why don't we just buy into this franchise? Because all the stuff that's painful for us, um, bookkeeping, I wrote our inventory tracking software. I wrote our customer ticketing software. I wrote our accounting software. Like I had built all these things in house. Um, and that's just not something that we could really scale. We weren't a software house. So I thought, Mike, why don't we buy into this franchise and take their systems, leverage the fact that they exist and know how this works, and use their brand, but do the same work and just manage people. I think we could probably be successful at that. Um, and he said, no way. I don't want to run someone else's business. I want to run my own business. And I think that was interesting because as a franchisee, you are running your own business. You just pay a little bit of a royalty to leverage some of the shared resources. But we had built a brand. I had done most of the brand development and we were proud of our brand. I still have a lot of my materials in a drawer right across the room because I'm so proud of what we built. Um, but it was like, I just need to become an adult now and I'm ready. So that's sort of how we broke up. I'm sorry we don't have the same goal anymore. I don't have another round of the dream left in me. I want to go make some money. Um, and it worked out because then since I wrote all this custom software for our shop, I could now officially consider myself a professional software developer. And I moved to Colorado and got nice high paying jobs writing software and had a great career after that in different startups. And um, I miss running my own business for sure. That's why I'm back in it. But it was the right choice at the time for me.
So, something important is know when to move on. I have a feeling I should take that lesson to heart, since I can be a bit stubborn, and I feel that I would
Hmm.
probably be easily stuck in a rut without external pressures.
Okay. Do you want to tell me more about that? Do you want to share an example of that?
Just an example of not making use of any of the on-campus resources until the third year that I'm here.
Yep.
So, example of my stubbornness. Uh, so, you went on ahead after you eventually went and founded a new business. What's this?
Yeah. So I just started. I just in the last year, I'm actually doing my taxes on the front and back side of this call. So this stuff is very top of mind. Um, but I started a business. Well, I formed an LLC a year and a half ago to do some work that a few of my colleagues and I really enjoy doing. And then I formed two more in 2022. So in the last year and a half, I've formed three LLCs. Um, and then I actually formed a fourth and then closed it down for its own challenging reasons. But that one I spent $425 on state filings and didn't do anything with it. But I've been looking at it through the lens of, well, through a couple lenses. I think one, I really love the dynamics of people and human interactions. And in hindsight, I should have been a psychology major and I should probably have a master's degree in some flavor of psychology, whether that's, in the neuroscience space and how our brain works or in more clinical perspectives like counseling. Um, but I think leadership is always sort of where it's been in the back of my mind. So I formed. So I formed an LLC called Work with Feelings because in a lot of the corporate work that I've done with executives and teams and team development and building high performing teams, it's the thing that's underneath all of the behaviors that we observe are our emotions and our feelings and how we're interacting with the world. Because every decision we make goes through the heart, and every environmental stimulus creates an emotional response. It all goes through our lizard brain and our monkey brain before it makes it up into our thinking and speaking brain. And so I think that a lot of our life we've been shown and told how to shut that down. And when I started to learn about the scale um, through which we all struggle with this, the more affirmed I am and I have become in wanting to be a part of that conversation with people. So the lens that I was trying to describe through this story was doing what you love and not having anybody say that you shouldn't or that you should do it a different way. Um, so that's one lens through which I framed my choice to become an entrepreneur again was I think I have something to give to the world and I enjoy and have had a lot of success in this space. So I'm going to form a business that lets me do what I love for whoever wants that service. Another lens through which to form an LLC is, or form an organization, is where's their unmet demand? What's an area of the world that's underserved? And so I formed. That's the first LLC I formed a year and a half ago. Was hey, I think we have a pretty interesting perspective on this problem. Let's be a part of that conversation as well, and let's see how far we can get there. Um, and that's really about over serving an underserved population. And then the last company that I formed was through the lens of just creativity. So, as a software developer, I've written tons of little things for myself that I have found to be useful and fun to build. And so I thought, well, geez, if some of these have utility for other people, why don't I try to get this software in their hands and see if I can turn a little bit of that into revenue? So, through these different lenses, why I got back in entrepreneurship, well, it's really challenging. It's extremely affirming. It is an opportunity for self-expression. And, through the people lens, I really want to create work environments that are really nourishing to individuals. And I think I can be that executive that a lot of people haven't had. I think I can be that executive or the leader to help shape the room for other organizations. So why wait? Why wait to find that leader? Why wait to find that human? Why wait to find that experience? If you can't find it, create it. And that's why I formed 3 businesses in the last 18 months. Somewhere one of these is going to work, and hopefully all of them work.
Wait, so three business. So what, like one every 6 months, or did you form all at the same time?
I formed 2 in the same day, and one, yeah, one the year prior.
Okay, and then so just like suppose something that might be useful. Then why don't you go ahead and walk through the process of creating a new business?
Yeah, it's there's a long story and a short story, but we'll start with the short story um, because it's really, really not that crazy. All you need to do to have a business is to just file some papers with the state. Um, I live in Colorado, which is a very business friendly state from that perspective, where you just go on the Secretary of State website and you fill out a form and you put your credit card in and you have a business. It's just that easy. To add a little color to it, um, when you register with the state, these records are public information. You can search and find them from anyone. So you want to put a little bit of protection around yourself in those documents. And so there's a service called a registered agent service that you should probably purchase. And for me, I found one out here that's like $35 a year. But what they give you is an address that all state communications have to go through, and you can buy mail service, you can buy all these other add-on services, but for the most part, all they're saying is, I'm your point of contact for this organization, so come find me. And that's different than if you just put your own information on the form. And then I've had this happen where, a yellow book salesman knocks on your door and it's like, hey, are you the owner of this business? I'm like, yeah. Like, well, I need to sell you yellow book ads. And I'm like, well, this is my house. So please leave. I don't want you knocking on my door whenever you want. So I say definitely get a registered agent, and you could do one of these very hands-off online services. But then when you register with a registered agent service, you can then use that address and contact information on the forms that you file with the Secretary of State. In the state of Colorado, all you need to do is just say who you are, make sure the business name is unique. You can also search in the trademark, the federal trademark office, to see if anyone has trademarked the name that you have in mind. Because the complication is you register your business at the state level. So you don't know if someone in Illinois has also created a business or an LLC under the same name as you. So you want to do a little bit of research to just say, hey, is this domain name free? Is it trademarked? Is the name trademarked nationally? And if not, then form it. So all you do to start with is just file documents with the Secretary of State. If you want to open a bank account, you also register to get an employer identification number from the Fed, and that's just a web form you fill out and they give it to you instantly. So there's no overlord saying, what is this business for? Are you sure you want to do it? You need my approval. It's more like a declaration than a request. So once you have that, you are free to, once you have your EIN, you could go and open a bank account if you want, drop some cash in there, or you could just not do anything. And you could look for clients, and you could just know that you have all the appropriate things filed so that you can act as your organization if you ever get the phone to ring. One other thing I'll add before I toss it back over to you for follow-ups is you do want to choose what type of entity to form. And I think for most people, if they're just a solopreneur, just one person, you want to form an LLC, and that you get some legal protection that way. And you essentially want to start acting as this entity you created. You want to act as the business as soon as possible. You don't want to be acting as an individual in a business context, because then you have the liability. If you mess up, if you do something and get sued, all of your personal assets are at risk. So that's why just form an LLC, and then only the assets of the LLC are at risk for your business. And your LLC can go bankrupt, but you can still have a life. So I recommend LLC. The other types are like corporations or professional services. So if you're a dentist, you form a different sort of entity than an LLC. But I find that you don't need to be a corporation or even an S corp right away. Just start with an LLC. You can always grow. When you get more investors than you're allowed to have in an LLC, then you can upgrade to a corporation, not a problem. But start with an LLC, file some paperwork. That's all you need. And then if you want to, go to the bank, open an account, get a debit card, put some money in there, and buy a domain name. And all of a sudden you exist. Get a WordPress template installed, and you exist. Get a Twitter handle and you're done.
Yeah. Now, I will preface that I don't think all states in the union support LLCs, or maybe it's something along the lines of that. Either way, it's definitely varies on a state-to-state basis, and obviously, I'm not entirely certain this is useful outside the United States. I presume other nations have an equivalent.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the business laws vary from country to country, and I have a colleague in the Netherlands, and when she started her business, she had to go to a specific building, make an appointment, have an interview with someone. There were verification and validation steps that needed to be completed to be able to have a business license. So I am only speaking for the United States for sure.
Yeah, and specifically the state of Colorado. Uh,
I mean, I think every state, whether they call it a partnership or an LLC, these are normalized terms that when you file taxes, like the IRS uses these terms, and so I think states support them, whether they name them slightly differently. The the idea of a limited liability partnership or a limited liability company should exist in every state.
yeah, and irregardless of whatever it's called, definitely you want to keep your personal away from your private and be very or no
Personal from business, yeah.
business. Yes, that's the term. Uh, Yes, otherwise, in the event of catastrophe, you become available to be tapped for bankruptcy.
Yeah, so people come after your personal assets if you don't have that protection. Um, I'm not a business attorney, so none of this is legal advice. I'm not a CPA, so none of this is tax advice. Uh, but I will say, from what I've learned, um, you also want to make sure that you fund your organization to show that you have some skin in the game, some upfront capital to cover your startup costs, because that's where there have been lawsuits in the past that say, you're not actually running a business, you're just using this as a shell or a cover because the funds are always you're always spending your own funds for business activities. So therefore, we should conclude that it's your personal funds that are at risk in this organization. And so I think you want to very clearly, if possible, delineate. And when I was in school getting my entrepreneurship certificate, I remember one of my professors told me the story about how in his LLCs his books look terrible because he's always emptying them. He's always giving himself owner's distributions anytime he has a balance because that way there's almost zero risk in the business. It's all been shuttled over to the personal side. But if the business needs more capital, you got to dump it back in. So I always thought that was interesting. It almost sounded sneaky at the time, but I think when you understand the dynamics of the legal protection and the tax laws, it makes total sense. You want to have that business be bone dry. You don't want to have thousands of dollars sitting there at any time unless you're going to spend it. You'd rather have it in your personal checking account
Yeah,
or invested somewhere.
yeah, I've taken engineering economics, and I can tell you the time value of money, given
There you
interest
go.
rates and whatnot. Tell you that a thousand
Yeah,
dollars today is not $1,000 tomorrow, and definitely not
exactly.
a year from now. Especially when it's just
Exactly.
sitting there. Now, if you invest it, that's another thing entirely.
Yeah, and so that's the fun thing as you build more financial literacy is you can start to do things with that cash. So if you're just a solopreneur or a partnership with just a few partners, it's in your interest to just dump all those assets back into your personal funds so you can do something with them to possibly grow. You just want to be thoughtful about it so that you have those funds available if you need to put them back in the business. And that's the tightrope that we walk is having it sit in the savings account is doing nothing. Putting it in the market includes risk. Um, so what's the right balance? And that's up to you. People are always telling you stuff, just like now. I'm telling you stuff now. It's your job to figure out what's important. Like the story I started with.
Yep. So then, I'd say that's some generalized business advice. Hopefully, someone
Yeah,
finds use in that.
hopefully.
Yeah. By the way, you had said you had like 5 lessons, the five
Yeah.
biggest lessons. I think you only went through 3, did you?
Yeah, I mean, I said, it's been 20 years since I came up with those five, but it's you don't get what you don't ask for. People are always telling you stuff. Um, know when to say no and when to say yes. Uh, I can't remember the other two, but they were very clear to me at the time. I think the most fun I had running that business was when I got to buy a billboard. It was it's a memory I'll always have for the rest of my life because I think we bought it for a month It cost like $700, but we chose this part of town where there's a lot of student traffic, where a bus line, students taking the bus would see it every single day, right by the plasma center for the students scraping together $25 for their fluids. Um, but it was so cool to have, first of all, our designer, put together a billboard design. It was really fun. But then to just get in the car and drive over there and see, this giant thing with your company on it that you built. um, I'd say it's ego, but it was more just gratifying. We put a lot of work into growing a business to the point that we had spare cash to put into things like a billboard. um, and it was just so satisfying to say, look, there I am. It's not me, it's not my face, it's my company, it's my effort. And uh, I'll just never forget the feeling of buying a billboard. It just doesn't feel the same to buy digital ads, uh, because everybody hates them.
Yes, the
And
glorious ad block. Got that installed.
yeah, and you just see the money just like fly away, and you're like, I have no idea. I have no idea if anyone in my actual target market saw this. I can't validate it, but I sure spent $2,000 in a hurry. So it was just really nice to just put that $700 up there and see it. I'll never forget that.
All right, 42 minutes. Uh, I'd say let's try and have you remember those last two lessons, and we can record them at a later date. Because I figure if they're
Okay.
important enough for you to detail them as your big five, well, we've only got three.
Yeah.
All right. In the
I don't know,
meantime,
man. I mean, I don't even think we had cloud storage back then. I don't know. I don't know where I'm gonna find them.
well, you can rack your brain. Maybe you'll be having dinner or something, and it'll just pop right into your head.
Yeah, I'll see. I'll look in my business folder from way back when, because I did keep some of those artifacts. So we'll see if I happen to have a notepad with the other two lessons on it.
All right. Well,
But other lessons, I mean, I think the only other topic that, not the only other, but one of the other topics that I feel really strongly about now, and I struggle to share just because of where you are in life. Um, so it might not make sense. Like, it might not be deep and meaningful, even if it makes sense. But I don't want to suggest that you couldn't understand it. Just that, to go back to where I'm going with helping people and doing people development work and psychology, we all struggle to be who we are. And so I think the lesson that I'm learning, and some people say you can't really learn until you're midlife, um, is is that you matter, and it's not like in spite of the things where you feel are obtuse or don't fit, but it's because of those things. And we all need to feel seen, heard, valued, and have a sense of belonging as human beings. It's our pack animal nature. And I think particularly at your age, you made it out of your teenage years somehow. You're exiting university. Um, there's just this big push to assimilate, and there's utility in that. Like that's useful. Um, but I don't know if I don't know if it feels right to you, but it's deflating in a way. It's defeating in a way, where we desperately want to have that reflection back that we belong, and also we feel the tension of where we don't fit. I don't know if that's resonating for you. Are you with me?
I I feel it a little bit.
Yeah. So learning the skills to identify when you're experiencing that tension, And this is where it starts to get a little more advanced, but not just internalizing that tension and accepting the narrative of there's something wrong with me or I'm not good enough. Um, so many people, like nearly everyone, wrestles with that. And it's so, it's almost a permanent struggle. And the only way I think that I've heard that we start to address that is to start to notice it and become curious about it. Because when we protect ourselves, we end up not being seen, which is the opposite of what we're craving. We're craving to be noticed. We're craving to be appreciated. Um, so I think this lesson here is about doing the hard things. It's about discovering and affirming what makes you you, what you care about, what you value, how you experience the world, and appreciating that that's distinct. Like we have types of people, there are certain patterns that we can see in the population, but your own lived experiences are unique to you. Where the meaning making might be similar to other people, you might reach similar conclusions based on established patterns and thinking. Like, although that might be similar, your stories are unique. Here you're harvesting my stories and the stories of others, but your stories matter too. And everyone who might listen, your stories matter too. And so I think the big lesson here that I'm trying to drive to is um, it's really an invitation to the value of the really hard work of accepting ourselves and honoring the parts of us that are just naturally us. So, for example, even though I like writing software, I decided that I didn't want that to be my job anymore. And people thought I was crazy because it pays well, it's in high demand, you get to do a lot of really interesting work. Those things are all great, but I do that for fun, you know, and it's ruining it. It was ruining my fun doing it for a job. And so now it's like I have this perspective that part of who I am is this creative software guy, and that's a hobby of mine. And it used to be a profession, but now it's a hobby. And I don't need to, apologize for having that interest. I don't need to apologize for not pursuing it as a profession. It's just how I experience it. Another example might be um, like I really like cycling, like riding a bicycle around. And for me, it's sometimes about transportation. Like I enjoy doing errands on a bike because it's a little challenging. You have to exercise, you have to figure out how to pack the right amount of gear. You can't buy too much at the store, otherwise you can't get it home. There's just a lot of fun problems that come up when you try to run an errand on a bicycle. Um, and that's another one of these things that, you know, I have felt criticized for my decision to be a bicycle commuter to work. I remember a woman in my office said, you have young children. What do you do if you need to hurry home? Like you don't have a car. I'm like, well, first of all, I can always take a car. Like I can get a cab or something. I can get home in a hurry if I need to. But also, I'm not probably the best first responder. Like someone else is probably better, would be better in an emergency situation than me. So call 911 if there's an emergency. I will get to wherever I need to as fast as I can, but it's not worth it to me to give up my cycling, um, to be operating in this fearful state of like needing to hurry somewhere in case there's a problem with my kid. Maybe those aren't the best examples, but there's some examples of know who you are. I think another one is this whole interest in people development. Like I'm a feeler. I've been a feeler my whole life, and oh man, here's a great. This just connected to another great lesson. Um, so I've been a feeler my whole life, and I'm gonna blend these stories. So my cousin graduated from high school during the pandemic. And so he didn't get a commencement. So I recorded a commencement speech for him. I don't know if he didn't ask for it. I just chose to do it. Um, and I liked it. But one of the things I said was, so many of us are told that like this is the path. You know, you go to college, you pick a major, you focus, you work hard, and life opens up for you. And you meet lots of interesting people. And it's like, that's not at all how it went for me. And so I just need you to know that it doesn't have to look like the story we've been told as long as you keep moving forward. That's all that matters is that you keep moving forward. I attended Iowa State University, Des Moines Area Community College, the University of Iowa, Kirkwood Community College. It took 6 years to get a general bachelor's degree, and I didn't even have good grades. But getting that degree mattered. So I wanted to share with my cousin, whatever path you take leads you to where you're going. It's just a necessity. Like it's the way time and space work together. Like we don't know what's coming. We just can do what's in front of us. And the more we honor ourselves in that process, the better. So I told him in this speech that I was always told, the hard things are valuable. Like challenge yourself. If you work hard, great things happen. And I internalized that as being take really hard courses in college. And so I did computer science, and we talked about Calc 2 and how Calc 3 was out of reach for me, and um, how I worked really, really hard, but I didn't work very smart. But I worked really hard, and it was depleting and exhausting. But there were other courses that I took that didn't feel like hard work at all. Child development, psychology, sociology. The only day I went to lecture in sociology was the day we had a streaker. And I missed my final exam because I wasn't at class to hear the instruction that the date had changed. So I emailed the professor. I said, I'm really sorry, I missed the exam. And they let me take it over, and I didn't study at all, and I got a B. You know, so these are signs that it's not that sociology is easier than physics. It's that, or that I should do physics instead of sociology because physics is hard. That was the wrong interpretation, but that was the interpretation that I lived by. And so what I shared with my cousin was, look, you should also pay attention to the things that are easy because there's a chance that you're just really interested in them. There's a chance that that's just a strength area of yours. And that you should look into that because I chose a lot of really hard things and found it to be not what I wanted to be doing, not because it was hard, but because it wasn't who I am. Like I care about people. I'm a feeler, in terms of like feeling experiences in the world and being empathetic and understanding to what other people are going through. So why the hell was I sitting down in like advanced physics classes? It's because they're interesting, but I was following the instructions. You know, those classes were hard. So I think that's another big lesson is your intuition, your stories, your life has informed you of what is fulfilling to you. There has to be something that is fulfilling to you, Alex. And I don't know what it is because I don't know you that well. But there's stuff in your life that you've lived that felt good, probably. It's a high likelihood of that. And there's other stuff you lived in your life that didn't feel good.
Indeed.
And how many times are you like me and you're looking at the things that don't feel good and you say, I should do them anyway? And it's useful. It's useful advice because growth comes from pain. If you want to build muscles, you have to work them until they're depleted and exhausted, and they grow back stronger. That pattern is universally true and useful. It is not useful when we try to fold ourselves into shapes that fit other people's expectations of us, for some made up reason. And that's what I did for a lot of years. And now I'm finally middle-aged and realizing that I don't have enough time on earth left to live that way anymore. And if I can help other people come to that same conclusion, we have a shot at making this place a lot more habitable. You talk about global warming, you talk about the challenges that face us. Um, we have a shot at making this place better for everyone. And I think it starts with us all realizing who the hell we are and being brave enough to say, this is what I stand for. This is what I want to see. And if I can't get that from you, I'm going to make it because it's that important.
Yeah. All right. And we are approaching an hour of recording. And yes. Would you be open to maybe doing another interview at some point in the future?
I think so. Especially, I think it would be really helpful to, collaborate a little bit before we get into it, just so I can make sure that I have some thoughts ready that are on point. But if you're getting value out of this and we can share these things with others, I'm happy to.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask that you do make an effort to try and find what those last two ideas were, or those last two lessons were.
I'm telling you, man, like they're likely just gone from my life.
Oh,
But I will look in the cabinet and see if I have them.
well, who knows? Yep. All right. I should have this edited together, I don't know, within a week-ish.
Okay.
I will email you when it is finished.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you for showing up and providing some of your lessons, some of your stories, and hopefully some useful business advice.
I did my best. We'll see if it's useful. That's all we can do. Show up and do our best.
Best we can
All
do
right,
is our best.
Alex.
All right.
Yeah. Well, take care, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, you too. All right.
Cheers.